there, I'm Jen, this is Remembered Reads, and this is going to be a midpoint check-in for March Mystery Madness, which is going to include my last week's wrap-up as well as a little library haul at the end. The first two books that I read for March Mystery Madness I talked about in my last wrap-up, so I will link to that below. After that, I picked up The Unquiet Dead by Ausma Zehanat. This is a police procedural that is set in Toronto. It follows two detectives who are part of a culturally sensitive crimes unit, and they are investigating the death of a person who turns out to have been a Serbian war criminal. I had been looking forward to this because I've heard a lot of good things about this series, although I was a little bit hesitant as to how that thematically was going to work, because I felt like that could very easily move into an exploitive kind of territory, but I was actually really impressed with how everything was handled here. The two main detectives that we follow are a young female, I was going to say Anglo-Canadian, but I think maybe she's supposed to be Irish because she refers to her father as Da. So maybe Irish-Canadian, and from a working class background and with an abusive family background. And alongside her is her boss, who's from a more upper class background. His family is Pakistani, and he has a lot of posh connections. So the two of them have their different views on things. I wasn't 100% sold on their dynamic, to be honest, but almost everything else in this worked very nicely. Again, I wasn't 100% sold on the ending, but it all worked. And I think in a procedural, you want the pieces to add up, and that all worked. I did think it was funny that in this there are a lot of Bosnian characters in this who go by assumed Anglo names, and I thought it was funny that almost all of them kept their initials or even the sound of the name, because I have a brother-in-law who has a fake last name. Not a fake last name, they changed their name, and it's nothing like their original name. But anyway, that was just something that I thought about, but I was super impressed with the way this worked. I never read a police procedural that had as many footnotes to this. I will say, if you're someone who's sensitive to hearing about war crimes, there are a number of scenes in here where pieces of the scenes are taken from actual testimonies, so a lot of this is hard to read. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to people who are into cozy mysteries, because this is definitely not cozy, but I thought this was incredibly powerful and well done. Next up, I read something that's sort of on the complete opposite in terms of mood, and that was Tantimedh's Her Beautiful Monsters, which is book number 2 in the Ravi PI series, which is about a private investigator based out of London who sees gods, and that's so it has that sort of mythological or religious side to it, but it's very irreverent. So the book actually deals with serious issues, but in a very kind of superficial and over-the-top way. The first book in this series had several cases. This one is just 2. The first one is about ex-Russian spies in London, and the second one is about gun running and other things, which I won't spoil, in Los Angeles. I found the London Russian plot to be a lot faster moving and a lot smoother than the Los Angeles-based one, and I don't particularly know why that was, because I think they were written in very similar styles. Some of it I think might have been because in the second one you only get the main character and his girlfriend from the main team, whereas in the first one you do get the whole cast of characters that we saw in the stories from the first novel. Now I realize there is a third plot in this, which is one of the other investigators is basically making recordings of something that she's investigating, so that's interspersed with the Los Angeles piece in this. They never particularly came together, but again, this is a lot of fun, even though it deals with certain heavy topics. So I was still entertained by this, but I definitely found the second half to be slow going, and I was a little disappointed by that, although I liked the other two parts. And finally, a book that I'm currently reading is Idle Fears by Stephanie Gayle. This is the second book in her Thomas Lynch series. I read the first one at the beginning of the month, so that was mentioned in my last wrap-up. With that one, I was kind of on the fence. I didn't like every element of it, but it flowed pretty well. With this one, I have kind of a similar issue in that I don't particularly buy most of the characters, but it's very engagingly written, so that even as I'm reading things and kind of rolling my eyes at the idea that some of these things would happen, or that people would say the things that they say and have the interactions that they have, I still find this compelling enough to go on with. So I'm entertained by this, but I'm not 100% certain on how good I actually think it is, if that makes sense. And I'll talk more about this once I've finished it. Next up, time for a bit of a library haul. Among the things that I picked up, this of course was one of the books that I picked up recently, but I also picked up a couple of others. I held up Volume 3 of Velvet during my last library haul, and I haven't read it yet because I didn't have Volume 2 yet, and that finally came in, so now I can get around to reading this. This is one of Ed Brubaker's crime, I think this is crime/spy, actually. It's been a while since I've read the first volume. Comics. The description on this one says, "Now she's coming back to London and taking the hunt back to the hunters." I think that'll be entertaining. I also picked up one of the follow-ups to the Unquiet Dead. This is The Language of Secrets, which I believe is the third book in this series. I have the second one on hold as well, which I think I may be able to pick up this week, so I may not start with this one if I can get to number 2 first. In this one, they seem to be investigating a local terrorist cell. So again, it sounds like it's going to be dealing with some heavy topics, and as I said, I was impressed with the other ones, so we'll see how this goes. I picked up a book that I've seen a number of people on BookTube talk about as well. The Widows of Malabar Hill by Sujata Massey, I think. The sticker is over the name. Yeah. And this is set in 1920s Bombay and is about a Parsi woman who I think is the lawyer. And her father's law firm is executing a will. She's investigating into these 3 widows, it sounds like. I've heard mostly positive reviews of this already, so I'm definitely looking forward to getting to that. And one book that I did not get from the library, but that I ended up with because my mother was visiting and she was reading this and left it behind for me, and that's Charles Todd's Racing the Devil, which is one of their Ian Rutledge mysteries. This one is set in 1919, and a vehicle is run off the road in France. And then something similar happens in England a year later, and investigation ensues. In my last library haul, I mentioned that I had picked up one of Charles Todd's other novels, and that was from the Bess Crawford series. So now I have one from each series to read. So yeah, that's been my week and a half in mystery reading and hauling. If you're taking part in March Mystery Madness, how's it going? Have you read some fun mysteries? Are you all mysteried out? Because I know that can happen. Anyway, I hope you had a great weekend. That's it for now. Ciao.